Welcome back into the Sports Source. This segment of our program brought to you by Calhoun's. It's tourney time. So if you are having friends over to watch the games, grab a Feed 5 pack from Calhoun's, East Tennessee's best barbecue, and they even sell Smoky Mountain Brewery beer to go. Calhoun's, it's great during the entire month of March and the tournaments. All right, want to show you here. Rick Barnes' year 3 at Tennessee is coming up. Here are the SEC standings from this past year. Where does Barnes' program stack up among its rivals in terms of overall health moving forward? Okay, now we'll be going back and forth to that throughout this segment. Mike Strange, I'm going to start with you as we welcome in Mike Strange. You wrote in the Sentinel that you're not penciling them into the NCAA, but you see that it's a possibility next year. Expand on that.
Yeah, if there's a 2018 bracket out there right now, I wouldn't put them in them right now. But I think it's very reasonable that they could get there. I think there will be enough tools to get there if things go right and there aren't a lot of unforeseen setbacks.
So for you, you look at where Rick Barnes is going into year 3, and it's on schedule in your view, or a little behind, or a little ahead?
What you all said in the first segment, I agreed with that. I thought they'd have a bad year this year. Actually, 16 wins, and I count Chaminade. 16 wins is a little more than I thought they would have. Again, though, the recruiting splash. You haven't seen the real recruiting splash yet. That's the only surprise. Otherwise, I'd say they're about on schedule, and I think they'll have several more pieces to the puzzle next year.
Well, let me go ahead and put that graphic back up, and let's talk about some specifics. Okay, they're in a different stratosphere from everyone. You may beat them, as they did this year, but you're not going to beat them over the long haul. They're winning the conference 9 times out of 10. Florida, I bring them up, not only to finish second, but Michael White, Coach of the Year, a guy that Tennessee was talking to before hiring Donnie Tyndall, that he wanted a huge buyout after the whole Conzo Martin thing. Tennessee said no. Everybody applauded that at the time. Yeah, we're being fiscally responsible. And he goes to Florida, and now he's the Coach of the Year.
I didn't applaud it.
Is that,
I'll tell you that.
is that based on those numbers with Florida and the Coach of the Year thing? A lot of that, he inherited a much better deal than Rick Barnes did.
Sure.
But how big of a problem is Michael White going to be moving forward at Florida?
Well, I think
compared to where you are.
You hit it. I think that he inherited a much better program, much better roster. But he is going to be a hindrance. But Florida's also, people don't want to hear, but Florida is traditionally going to be a better basketball program. They've got a better recruiting base. They've got more tradition of winning national championships.
Which has changed in the last 20 years. 20 years ago, people wouldn't say they had the tradition,
right.
But they do now.
It is. When you go to talk to recruits, Florida has more wow power than Tennessee.
And Florida's also become, you also have the IMG academies and everything down there. There was a time when Florida wasn't the basketball recruiting hotbed. Now you get a lot of players coming out of Florida that go all over the country. Thoughts on Florida being a hindrance to Tennessee moving forward? I think a lot of Tennessee fans look at it and say it should be Tennessee and Florida battling for that number 2 slot behind Kentucky most years. Is that fair to think that Tennessee will be in that position at some point?
I think Tennessee's battling for the 3 spot.
Okay.
In my opinion. I think both of you hit it on the recruiting advantage that they have with Michael White as a coach there. I think they're going to be – look, I don't know that they can do what Billy Donovan did, in other words, win 2 national championships back-to-back, but I think they're going to be a strong player, a top 20 team basically every year with Michael White. So, yeah, they're going to be a hindrance to Tennessee, but in basketball, obviously, if you take care of your business in the SEC and you finish 3rd, you could have a really good basketball team and be 3rd.
All right, you want to say very quick.
The reality is we talked about Tennessee is moving in the right direction, maybe the NCAA tournament. The reality is SEC basketball is getting a lot better. You go down and look at all these rosters of who's bringing what back. A lot of teams are bringing a lot back. So Tennessee, yes, they're going to be better, but so is Texas A&M. So Alabama's coming on strong, not only with what they've got on their roster, but in recruiting.
Auburn will be a year older.
Auburn's going to be better. Vanderbilt with Bryce Drew is a guy that brings a ton back, and so the whole league is getting a lot better while Tennessee also improves.
Okay, well, that's what I was going to ask. Where do you put Tennessee long term? You've got a Hall of Fame coach in Rick Barnes who hasn't hit the recruiting jackpot here at Tennessee. He's up against Arkansas. Mike Anderson having his best year. Maybe he's turned a corner at Arkansas, and of course they have tradition when they get it rolling. Frank White at South Carolina had a breakthrough year this year. Does he keep that going? Andy Kennedy is always where he is. He's good enough not to get fired and bad enough not to win an NCAA tournament game.
But tough to beat year in, year out.
Tough to be. Yeah, okay. He's a good coach. Avery Johnson at Alabama, done a little bit better than I expected him to do, to be honest with you.
I think that's a guy that's going to have Alabama competing up there. You mentioned the third spot for that third and fourth spot consistently in the SEC.
And I think Bryce Drew. You guys know what I always brag on David Williams, the AD at Vandy. I don't know if he's worth $3 million a year, but the guy hires good coaches, and Bryce Drew is another good hire. Where do you put Tennessee in that mix? Do you say all those guys are just one big jumble and we'll see, or do you say now Tennessee's upper echelon of the SEC?
I would say if Tennessee does have its stability back, and I think that's starting to be the case, that the goal should be 3 to 5. If you're talking about the pecking order of the SEC, where you're trying to get, and maybe you can make a big run in the league. But what Tennessee's saying about itself, what it hopes to be over the next year or two, rightfully Alabama saying that, Vanderbilt saying that, those schools that Martin just ran through, they have the same goals, and they have just as many reasons as Tennessee to feel like they can get there. I think it's about patience for Tennessee over the next couple of years. You have no junior class, so you're talking about these guys being there for 2 more years at least with a lot of these players.
Mike, you've got facilities as good as, with the exception of Kentucky, your facilities are as good as anybody in the SEC. Maybe as good as Kentucky, depending on how you want to look at it, how orange your lenses are in your glasses. You've got a Hall of Fame coach. Give me a reason why Tennessee shouldn't be in the top 3 or 4 or 5 in the SEC every year.
Well, they should be, except that they've gone through a real period of turmoil that's really set the program back, and it takes time to recover from that. That's, to me, that's the only reason they wouldn't be or shouldn't be, is just the turmoil they've been through here.
Makes sense. Okay, guys, we'll have you back a little bit later. Mark, when we come back, we're going to talk about Butch Jones and the spring practice that's coming up. How big is this spring practice for Butch Jones? And also, any concerns that you get so much turnover on the staff, you don't get off on the fast footing. Come on back, we'll talk football.